The benefit of being out here on Pine Island, it's dry. We literally have 9 months without a drop of rain. I've seen trees planted at 8 feet distance. As long as they're maintained at a 6 to 8 foot height, you can keep them at a 6 to 8 foot distance. And that tree right there is 25 years old. And none of these trees I have any irrigation to except for the Mamey and the jackfruit and the breadfruit. We'll put them into the next size up so that they don't sit in one pot for a very long time. You don't want them to get root bound. This is my avocado, one of my avocado sections right here. So there's about a foot distance, or I always recommend 3 gallon to start off with, because you know you've got a healthy tree.
Hello everybody, welcome to Fruitful Trees. I am here at this amazing fruit stand called Fruitscapes, but it's also a nursery. And today we're going to walk around with the owner, Steve. He's been here for 30 years and it's about 10 acres. All right, 10 acres. And absolutely, I've been trying to get to this place for a long time, and I'm so glad I did. And you will be glad too. We're on a place called Pine Island, which is in Southwest Florida. And we got into a lot of things today that I've been talking about on this channel a lot. I've gotten a lot of answers here today. Steve's a wealth of knowledge. They do sell trees, wholesale and retail. Contact them at the link below. And if you are visiting Pine Island, they have a fruit stand here that has fruits in season. I definitely recommend this place. We're gonna go and check this place out now, so here we go. All right, everybody, so here's Steve, and this place is Fruitscapes. Steve, thanks for being on the show. I've been wanting to get here for a long time.
Well, it's good to have you out here. Thank you for coming out. I'm excited to show you.
So tell us, how long has the place been here?
This fruit market has been here for about 30 years. We purchased it in 2008. And so we've been managing it for about 16 years now, a little over 16 years. And we turned it just from a tiny little fruit shack. Basically, it was just a little stand with sheets on the top of it to protect you from the sun. And it was only open in the summertime. So we turned it into a full-blown grove and a nursery as well. And our specialty is just fruits that you can grow down here in South Florida.
Now, 30 years ago, what inspired you? Did you grow up growing fruits and things, or did something
I grew up growing papaya, chili peppers. I was always hands-on gardening as I grew up, and I fell in love with mangoes in my early 20s, and I knew that Pine Island was the place to be for mangoes, at least on this coast. And it was the affordable place to be to grow mangoes at that time. Land was very affordable back then, so I just took a dive and got me 5 acres of land and just went into growing mangoes and lychee as well. And I also dabbled with papaya, but they didn't do very well around here.
Sure. And so you grew up on the West Coast?
I grew up in Virginia.
Oh, wow.
In Southern Virginia. And after I was 20 years old, I moved down to Florida. And I spent most of my time in Sarasota and Tampa.
Okay, great. So here you are. So you got 5 acres and you're growing mostly mango trees. Mostly
mango trees. But we have a collection of about 100 different types of fruit trees in total. Not just on this property, but on our own property, on other properties that we have. But primarily, our biggest crop out here on this farm is mango. Okay, so when you grow mangoes and your other fruit trees, I mean, there's a lot of things going against them these days. Do you keep your trees on water, or is the water table here so high you don't need to? Believe it or not, so we don't irrigate our mangoes at all. And I encourage everybody here on Pine Island to, when they plant, water the trees for the first 2 to 4 years, depending on how close they are to the water table. But after 4 years, we turn the water off on our mangoes completely. And I mean completely. We don't give them a drop of water, even if we go through 8 months of drought. Their taproot will supply them with enough water that they will survive. And I find that doing that, we create a sweeter fruit by drying these mango trees out and just having them survive on what they can get themselves. Because if you artificially irrigate mango trees, I find that the fruit becomes very washed out in flavor.
Now that's here on Pine Island. Would you recommend that for all of Florida or just Pine Island?
I can't say that I recommend that for all of Florida because I'm not familiar with other areas. I know some areas are 20 to 40 feet above water table. They might be sitting on a salty water table. I know on Pine Island we have a very good freshwater ground level here. At about 4 feet, you go down any time of the year, maybe 6 feet at the most, and you hit fresh water. It never becomes salty here on the center of the island. But as you get close to the mangroves, it can become salty, and that's where it gets tricky. But we're right here on the highest point of the island. We're at 12-foot elevation, and our tap roots go down in about 2 years, and we can turn off the water, and they do fine. But for the rest of the state, every little land area is different. Every zone is different, and I know Pine Island, how to grow mangoes here. I wouldn't be a good resource for telling people how to grow my mangoes in Miami or West Palm Beach.
So so salt water is not good. They need fresh water.
They need fresh water.
Okay.
But what I find is after the hurricanes, there are groves that sustained flooding, saltwater flooding, and most of the trees that were 4 years and younger died instantly. Any tree that was 4 years and older that had their own taproot down to the fresh water, they survived, and they survived fine. That salt water that flowed in was surface, and it killed off the surface roots, but the taproot was still pulling in fresh water, and they survived just fine.
From a watering standpoint with other fruit trees, do you find them similar? They don't need irrigation or stuff?
No, on Pine Island, everything needs irrigation except for mangoes. And I think that's why most people grow mangoes out here, is because it's the one thing that survives our tough climate out here.
Okay, so now from a standpoint of diseases, I know there's certain ones that affect the East Coast that you haven't gotten here yet, but do you think it's necessary, if you're going to go grow mangoes, not on a commercial level, on a backyard level, where people need to spray to get productive mangoes?
We're lucky. We're very lucky out here. I hear about all the problems that they have in Miami, West Palm Beach on the East Coast with fungal problems. The benefit of being out here on Pine Island, it's dry. We literally have 9 months without a drop of rain. It's a desert out here. It's surprising that anything survives. When our trees flower, it's very dry. They come out very clean. We will get some powdery mildew on there, but it's not much. On my entire grove, I never spray anything, and I don't worry about it because I know that the trees will always give me more than I can handle. So I don't even bother spraying them because I don't want to stress them out and overburden the trees with a massive amount of fruit. They still produce enough fruit for me to make a living off of out here at the stand. So I don't even bother spraying them.
So for the backyard grower in other areas, even when they get the diseases, if their tree produces enough for them as much as an abundance, spraying, is it healthier for the tree not to spray? It's
healthier for the tree not to spray. It's healthier for your pollinators not to spray. And I'll get questions all the time. What do I spray on my tree to keep these green flies from flying around my mango blooms? And I just look at them and say, look, that's what's giving you fruit. If you spray and kill those, you're not going to get any fruit. So what do you want to do? You want to spray and kill the insect that's pollinating your tree, or do you want to have fruit? But yeah, everything that you spray on a bloom is detrimental to the tree usually, or the insects that pollinate it.
Now what about things like nutritional sprays? Like, would that be good off-season, helpful to spray, or not needed?
I've always practiced putting nutrition to the roots. Nutritional sprays, I find, are superficial. They go into the leaf and they do help the tree, but they really don't go into the tree too far. In order to get the tree to benefit from nutrients, you need to apply it to the roots where they take it up naturally. That's their intake. You know, we're designed to take food and our nutrition through our mouth. If we spray it on our skin, we don't get that absorption that we get by ingesting it. Trees get their intake from their roots. That's how they intake it. So I think spraying nutritional spray is just superficial. It'll green up a leaf pretty quickly, but it doesn't correct the problem. The problem starts at the root level.
And how helpful it is for the tree to have enough space and airflow and sunrise. Does that make a big difference?
It does. The original grove here was planted in a east-west fashion, and what we find is that the fruit production is always on the south side. There's never a fruit production on the north side because there's never any sunlight on the north. So if you want to orientate your trees in the correct fashion, north and south is the best way to do it. That way they get sunlight on the east side and they get sunlight on the west side, and then you'll get crop distribution on both sides of your tree. And ideally, if you can get the tree far enough where it doesn't get shade from another tree all around, then you get more production all around the tree evenly.
I know it depends on the variety, but what did you find is the ideal spacing if you had to start all over again and start from scratch?
It depends on how rigorous you are at pruning your trees. I've seen trees planted at 8 feet distance. As long as they're maintained at a 6 to 8 foot height, you can keep them at a 6 to 8 foot distance. But if you don't have that rigor to prune, and that would require you pruning 3 times a year. If you don't have that ability to do so, which is very labor intensive, the best thing to do is give them about 20 to 25 feet spacing. That way you can keep it at a manageable level, maybe 12 to 15 foot in height, and still get sunlight all the way around the tree.
All right.
But,
well, we're excited. We're excited to see your trees. What has been your, does it change year to year, or is there one particular variety that's been your most productive consistently over the years?
Our most productive is Nam Dak Mai, because that's what we started off with in the beginning. And that was our first variety out here, and those are our most established trees. So that seems to be our most productive at this point. And we'll always have Nam Dak Mai on hand.
Are your trees 30 years old, pretty much, or did you plant them right away when you got the land?
Most of them are 24 to 25
So you were
years
here
old.
about 5 years before you got going?
I wasn't here myself. The original owners were here, and they planted a few other trees, but I planted the mango trees in 2000 and 2001. So I planted the mango trees, but they planted other trees that were out here. Unfortunately, most of those trees that they planted back in 1995 are gone because of Hurricane Charlie, which took most of them out. The only thing that really survived was a few mango trees that we planted back in 2000 and 2001.
What percentage to mango trees versus other fruits do you have?
90% mangoes. Everything else is just for display, experimental, but the majority of it's mango.
Okay, but other fruit does grow well out here as well, right?
Oh yeah. We grow everything. We grow Sapadilla, we grow Mamey, Carambola does very well. Kaimito. There's a long list of things.
What about white sapote and black sapote? How do they do here?
They do very well. They do very well, but they're very finicky on how you grow them. Black sapote, on one hand, is very easy to grow out here because it will tolerate water table that raises and lowers throughout the year. Some people are fortunate enough to live where their water table stays at the same level throughout the year, and so the roots can go down to it and they don't get flooded. But we are not in that situation. Our water table will fluctuate. So trees that grow their roots down to the water table can have their roots die off as the water comes up. And that's one thing with avocados. Avocados have a tendency of going down looking for water. And as the water table rises, it floods and kills their roots, even if you raise them up above the ground. So they struggle. But white sapote is the same way. It doesn't like that fluctuating water table. So it struggles out here a little bit, but black sapote does fabulous.
And also jackfruit, I assume, would be in the same situation as the white sapote, right?
Not as bad. Not as bad. I've seen them. They can dry out pretty quickly as the water table goes down, and then when it comes back up, they tend to have a more superficial root system. So they're not as bad, but they will die from flooding.
But it is possible to grow avocados and white sapote here.
Oh yeah,
more
you just have to. Yeah, it's more challenging. You have to make sure you have your beds well ditched or up on higher areas. And we have an area over here which is about a foot higher than the rest of our surrounding property, and the avocados have been there for 20 years.
Okay, so you just got to know what you're doing.
Yeah, you just have to make sure you place them at the right elevation.
At right elevation and ditch them around. So
yeah, make sure there's good drainage so that the water will flow off.
Okay, and you grow black sapote here?
We do. I've got a gorgeous tree over here.
What variety do you know?
It's called Black Beauty.
Oh, Black Beauty. Okay, I haven't tasted that variety yet, but I recently bought a tree.
We'll take a look and see if I can find fruit on there still. It's
That's
a bad
great.
time of year for them because they just came off maybe a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, I know. I see some still have them hanging on this late, but I'm trying to gather several different varieties. So we'll take a look at that. So let's take a look.
You want to take a look
growth.
around? Okay.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Right here we have an Alano Sapadilla, and this thing has been beat to death, and it just keeps coming back. We grow breadfruit out here. It's borderline here. It's in the wintertime the leaves will get a little bit damaged because it'll get down to 40 degrees. But this tree here had fruited for us 2 years ago, and then the hurricane kind of lended over last year and broke a few branches, so it's still in its recovery mode. Jackfruit, this is only about a 3-year-old jackfruit right here, and they do very well.
What variety is that?
This is Tony Morris Red.
Okay.
Which I can't say I've ever tried the fruit. I hope it's good.
Now, did you plant that?
Yeah, we planted that 3 years ago.
So what made you, when you decide what variety to plant, what do you determine that on?
What our friends and what our customers are asking for. And a lot of my customers will come to me and say, hey, I found this really good jackfruit or a really good black sapote. I want to share it with you. I want you to propagate it, but I want you to propagate it for me first, and then you can propagate it to your other customers. And that's what I do. I'll put that in, and I'll say, okay, you get dibs on it for the first year, and then after that it goes out to everybody else.
Gotcha.
So that way it encourages them to share with me, and it gives them exclusivity for a year, so that they can be the ones to sell it that first year. So this is
Mamey.
Mamey. They tend to. This is called Pontine, the Pontine variety.
Key West.
Key West.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
They struggle at first to get their balance because they don't like that fluctuating water table. But once their roots have been burned back a few times, they kind of establish a nice level underground where they can keep their roots healthy. And this one has finally figured out its footing. It's a 15-year-old tree.
Well, this is encouraging. I got a question about Mamey. I have a tree that's nice size, about 5 years old, maybe 7 years old. You planted this pretty close to the other trees here, but you see a good amount of fruit on it.
There is.
Now, obviously, because it's close, you have to keep this somewhat trimmed, right?
Yeah.
So the amount of fruit you're getting here, I'd say maybe there's 10 fruit on there now, 15 fruit. Can you expect a big fruit set every year on a tree this size of a Mamey?
I think so. I think so. We were discouraged at first because we see the rate of growth here as compared to the rate of growth in Homestead. It's so much greater in Homestead. I mean, Mameys love that soil. They love that water table. They love that fresh water. Here they struggle. So I think a Mamey could accomplish this size in maybe half the time down there than it would up here. But yeah, I do anticipate keeping this tree at this height and getting, I think there's probably about, if you look at this closely, there's probably about 30 to 40 fruit on the entire tree. Some of them will still lose between now and summertime but I think we'll get at least 25 to 30 fruit off of this tree. And
so even down in Homestead, if we're doing this close will work if you maintain the tree.
Yes, yeah. And the reason why we planted them so close, because this was just a demonstration garden right here. This was only meant to be demonstration of how the tree will grow rather than for fruit for sale. The benefit is we get some fruit off of it.
It's still a great example for people like me who have a small yard to show what you can grow and what you can do.
The distance there is only about 10 foot.
Wow, and what's that other
There's
tree?
a Caimito, that's Hippolito Caimito.
Another tree that normally grows really big and tall. So
and it's about the same age as well.
And you're able to do it.
But it's been broken in half a couple times from successive hurricanes, so, but it's still doing very well.
So even if somebody had a yard this small, they could plant 3 trees, big trees, as long as they maintain it.
Absolutely, absolutely. So that's about the size that you'd want to keep them at. So once you get the fruit off, then you can go ahead and start pruning them up at the end of the summer just to keep them shaped and keep them under.
And that's tricky with the Mamey because they have baby fruits years in advance. The other trees are much easier.
It is tricky with them because you're looking at a year and a half for those fruit to mature. And but if you do it at the right time, they flower right after you cut them, so you don't really lose too much.
Sure. Now, when you were talking about pruning the mango three times a year to maintain it, I know right after the fruit you would prune it.
Yeah.
So then you don't want to prune it too late; it affect next year's crop. So when would you be pruning the tree?
So in an ideal climate for like in Thailand, what they do is they have these trees at 6 foot high, and what they'll do is they'll get fruit production a couple times a year. So on one side of the tree they'll prune that, and then 3 months later they'll prune another side. And then 3 or 4 months later, they'll prune another side. So they're constantly working around that tree, keeping it in balance. And they perpetually keep, I've seen 20-year-old trees that are 6, 7 feet tall, 8 feet wide. And you just walk around that tree and you just pick the fruit. You don't have to climb a ladder.
So the point being is half of the year they might not get fruit on one tree, but they're getting it in the other half.
Right.
But now here where we don't get a crop.
Where we don't get that year-round crop, so it would be more difficult to prune. So what you have to do is you have to selectively cut branches that may have few fruit on them or not any fruit at all. You cut those branches back so that those are growing while the fruit is growing, and then when the fruit comes off of the other branches, you cut those branches immediately back.
Sure.
Once they make
or
fruit.
Perhaps maybe semi-annual you'll get fruit if you cut one year you cut one side and the other year you cut the other.
You could do that as well.
Wonderful.
You could do that as well.
All right, so let's see what else you got growing on here.
This was a beautiful Starfruit, and this is one of the things that do very well out here on Pine Island, believe it or not. They are their trunk, and they're very well rooted in the ground. They don't come out of the ground, they don't fall over when a hurricane comes, but they get completely stripped of all their leaves. That's their survival mechanism, is letting the leaves just fall off, and then they're just nothing but branches left that just the wind goes right through. So they recover quick. There's a grove up the road here who had 3 months after Hurricane Ian, devastated their grove. 3 months later, boom, they had a crop of carambola on there that they were picking. So they leafed back out immediately and they fruited right away. Flower to harvest on carambola is very quickly, something like 60 to 90 days. It's one of the fastest fruits for such a large fruit. It's very fast. So they're very tolerant of our conditions out here on Pine.
North to south, all over Florida, this is probably the most versatile tree that you can grow in all of Florida.
It is. If I wasn't doing mangoes, I would do carambola, but the market for carambola is in the dumps. Nobody wants to go through and buy 10 pounds of carambola and just snack on them at night.
Actually, that's true, but you go to Publix and they're like $2 for one fruit.
Yeah, and most of that time they go to somebody who's never tried the fruit before, so it's like a sucker born every minute, so type of thing. But it's a good fruit if you know how to prepare it right. It's just something you don't want to sit down and have a dessert with.
Sure. Like now, even doing that, and some people say it's toxic because there's
it has oxalic
right?
acid in there or something like that. I know I mispronounced it, but that acid is like a crystal, and it can cut your kidneys or or it can cause kidney stones.
Now, is that only in the ridges, or is it the whole fruit? Because some people say
I've heard people say they cut off the ridges to avoid that crystal, but maybe it concentrates in the ridges more. It could be an old wives' tale. But either way, I tell people, limit your consumption to a couple a day. I mean, if you just go and juice a whole gallon of it and you go through that every couple of days, that might be a little too much.
Got you.
I think if you're healthy, it's not a problem. And I know many people who eat it continually.
Right.
Over here.
And by the way, so you have a fruit stand. Is this only local, or do you ship mangoes in the mail?
We don't ship anything because we don't have enough ourselves to ship.
Okay.
And we really don't even have enough to provide to our own stand. So the entire island, we sell trees to all the farmers out here, and in exchange they bring their crop here, and we sell it out here. So it's like a farmer's market.
What about trees? Do you ship trees online?
We do. Well, we don't ship trees online. We ship trees to other nurseries throughout the state.
Okay.
And if you live in a part of the state where it's not convenient to get here, we'll recommend a nursery in your
So you're
area.
more of a tree wholesaler? We
are.
Okay.
Yeah. We do retail out of here as well, but 90% of our trees go out wholesale.
And on the wholesale, is it just mangoes, or is every tree that you have you wholesale?
Every tree.
Okay.
Yeah, we've got an extensive list from carambola, avocado, guava, you name it. Any fruit that grows down here, we grow it.
But like for Black Sapote, you only have Black Beauty, or you have all the varieties?
Right now, I only have Black Beauty because that's the only tree on the property. But if somebody requests that I graft a certain variety, I can do 50 or 100 of them.
Got you. What about White Sapote? How many varieties of that do you have?
We only have Redlands, and we have Subel.
Okay.
Yeah, so the only two varieties that we have on the premises, but if we got budwood from anybody who requests that we do another variety, we're happy to do that as well.
All right.
I just want to show you this tree right here. It's called a Cecropia. It's a very, very beautiful tree, and it does make an edible fruit. Unfortunately, I don't see any fruit on there right now.
They call it the worm fruit.
The gummy worm fruit, yeah. This one is very difficult to make because it can only be done by air layer. The seeds are not viable on this, but it's a very showy tree.
Yeah, a big tree. It grows big, fast.
It's kind of like a cross between a mulberry and a melon flavor.
Yeah. What are these?
This is a dwarf beetle nut.
Are they edible?
They're edible. But there's a certain way to use them. You put a little bit of lime and another baking soda in there, and it brings out it's like a drug.
Sure.
And it's what most Indians have chewing in their mouth and make their teeth black.
Sure.
Yeah. I'll have them come in here a lot of times with packets just so that they can mix it with the beetle nut.
Wow. So I'm looking at this island here. So everything's about 10 feet apart.
Yeah.
And it's working. If somebody has a small yard, you can keep it like this. How many years have you maintained this little area?
This area, all these trees were about 14 to 15 years old. So except for that jackfruit. That jackfruit is maximum 4 years.
What's on the other side of the jackfruit?
The breadfruit.
Breadfruit,
and that's about 5.
So you're able to do that. Look, folks, you can keep these trees 10 feet apart and it'll work. Yeah,
so some of them are only 5 years old, some are 10, 12, but you can keep them all the same height. And
look how many Mameys are there.
Yeah, you just look at it. It's at least 40 on there, probably.
Very well, okay. Then you have even another one closer right here.
Yeah, I had a Sapadilla there that was doing real good that was taken out by a hurricane a few years back.
And that's real close to the...
That's real close. That was damaged back in Hurricane Charlie, and then there was a hurricane back in 2017, Irma, I believe, took its toll on it. And then the grafted portion died, and there might be one branch coming up above the graft, but this is all seedling.
Interesting.
Which most Sapadilla seedlings are very grainy, and not too many people care for that type of fruit. Canistel does okay. This is a Fairchild number 2. But my favorite Sapadilla are these Alanos right here. they bush out really nicely. They recover really quickly from any damage from a hurricane, and they fruit profusely.
And that's big, but you can keep them at bush size if you want to.
Yes, you can. Those are 20-year-old trees right
wow,
there.
Wow, wow. Alrighty.
So this is Ambarella, and this is the giant Ambarella. It's about the size of a guava, I would say, and they break up a little bit from the hurricanes, but they're very drought tolerant. And none of these trees I have any irrigation to, except for the Mamey and that jackfruit and the breadfruit. Those three always need irrigation, but the Caimito, Canistel, Mango, Sapadilla, Ambarella, once they're in the ground for a couple of years, they hit the water table and they do fine.
So Mamey and...
Mamey seems to need a constant supply of water.
And what's the other one?
The jackfruit.
Jackfruit, okay.
And the breadfruit, we keep the water on it, but it seems to be drought tolerant as well.
So the other ones you don't. Okay, good, good. The Amarella, what kind of fruit is that? Is that similar to like a...
That's about the size of a guava. They're crunchy, related a little bit like a mango flavor, but more sour. They have a big seed on the inside that some people call them like fish bones because they go in every direction, and you got to be very careful when you eat them because you get them stuck in your teeth. This is the Black Beauty.
Oh, look at that.
Black Sapote, and it's been beaten by several hurricanes, and it's leaning, but it's still gorgeous. It's beautiful.
Tell us about this variety. I mean,
Black Beauty is a seedless variety. It's very big, about as big as a pomelo. They can get about maybe about a pound, pound and a half per fruit. They're not the common smaller ones as well, but we like it because there's no seed in there and it gives you a lot of pulp. So
the taste is pretty decent.
I compare them all about the same. I haven't tasted any Black Sapote that knocks my socks off.
Have you tasted a Reineke?
I have not.
Yeah, that's have a sweeter flavor.
I've heard about that. I'd like to try that.
Yes. So the size of this tree, besides the hurricane knocking it back, have you pruned this tree?
Yeah, we have pruned it in addition to hurricane prunes as well.
And can you keep these trees?
These are very tough to keep at a small scale because they are such a vigorous tree. This doesn't have any irrigation at all, and it grows like a weed. And the last hurricane we had was just under 6 months ago, and it broke a lot of the branches on there, and that's one of the reasons why we don't have any fruit on there right now. And it still looks like nothing happened to it.
Do these do well without irrigation?
They will. At first, they need irrigation. They're very thirsty, but once they get the roots down, they're bulletproof.
Wow, wonderful, wonderful.
And
so they're all done for the season.
They are. I think I've checked.
Now I'm seeing you're air layering this tree.
Don't think it works, but we just figured we'd try it out.
That's an experiment. Okay.
Yeah.
But they grow great from seed, right?
They grow great from seed, but the problem is a lot of times you'll get a male and a female. So a grafted tree is better.
Okay, but if you do it from seed, you could still graft it.
Oh, you can still graft it, yes.
Are they easy to graft, these trees?
They are. They're pretty easy.
Now they're in the persimmon family, right?
They're in the persimmon family.
But persimmons themselves aren't easy to graft, but these are.
I find persimmons are decent to graft.
Decent, okay.
But the timing is the hardest part. You have to make sure you get it right before it busts in the springtime, before it pushes. And the timing is the critical thing on the persimmon. Whereas these, you can do them just about any time of the year, except in the middle of the winter. I haven't been successful with grafting Black Sapote, but you probably could if it's in a warm environment because they're evergreen.
Would it be a good idea to multi-graft a Black Sapote tree if you had access to other budwood?
I don't see why not. Yeah. I think that would be great. But you might get some varieties that outcompete another and might be more vigorous. Usually the ones that produce less fruit will grow faster than the ones that produce fruit. So you may have to keep it in control
All right.
But yeah, this is
yeah, it looks like it's done for the year. The season is generally what for this?
The season, our harvest season is usually January, February into March. And usually they flower right around now, March and April. And I don't see anything coming off there right now. I don't see any flowers. Could have been too distraught from the hurricane, de-leafing it, defoliating it. It might mess up its cycle this year.
Okay.
Canistel as well. These guys don't get any irrigation. This is a 20-year-old tree. I have seedlings that pop up, and when they get rain for 2 or 3 months in the summertime, they have enough energy to put down a taproot, and then they survive. They'll grow slower without irrigation, but they survive.
Now that's still about 20 feet, right?
That's about 15 right there.
15 feet.
Yeah. And then there's another Canistel about 10 feet away, right here.
So is 15 feet what you would recommend on a black sapote? Or would you give it
Yeah,
more?
actually, you're probably better off going to 20 because they're such a big tree. But if you were vigorous and maintaining it, you could probably get away with 15 feet.
Okay. And there's 2 more Canistel.
And Canistel, so this Canistel is the same age as that black sapote right there.
There you go.
can see that's been pruned back as well, but the habit is half of what the black sapote is. So you can easily maintain Canistel 10 feet apart. Yeah, here's another one that's just 10 feet apart. And I believe this one, I think this one was a seedling from that just fell and dropped down, and we wound up grafting it right there in the spot. Another Sapadilla. Sapodillas just do
Which
great
variety
out
is
here.
that?
This is Hacia.
Hacia.
I believe it's Hacia. It could be Alano as well. I don't know. We lost the tag.
Smaller.
Hacia is usually a bigger fruit.
But you have a map inside somewhere.
Yeah, I do.
Okay. Everybody remember, if you lose tags, have a map.
I don't have a map in my head anymore.
Yeah.
But the Canistels are fruiting right now. But their cycle has been screwed up from the hurricane as well.
Sure.
This is a very interesting fruit. This is called Maprang. And this is a mango relative. And that tree right there is 25 years old.
Wow.
It grows very slow. We thought we were going to lose it many times, but it's flowering, it's set fruit.
Has it fruited before?
It's fruited for the past 4 years.
Oh, wow.
And this year it looks like we've got the most fruit on it that we've ever had. It does well here, but it takes a long time to grow. It's a great fruit. This is my avocado, one of my avocado sections right here. So there's about a foot distance, or a foot different in elevation between where we grow everything and then our avocado field. And we have a Brogdon here, we have a Marcus pumpkin, and we also have a choquette, which look horrible because we've pruned them back severely, but they do very well out here. The one that's growing in the lower section is a day avocado, which is a dwarf. And that one's doing the worst of all these avocados.
Where's that one?
This one right here.
Okay.
Half the top of it is dead. Because that was probably, it died back when it got a little flooded back here from the hurricane.
So what's the safest you can get away planting avocados distance-wise?
I think you can maintain an avocado at 10 feet as long as you keep them pruned. At my house, I do keep them at 10 feet because I cram a lot in. And I keep the trees under 10 feet in height, usually about 8 feet. And they do very well. And but yeah, the Brogdon does spectacular out here on this higher ground, and it produces like crazy. This is one of our white sapotes. Don't know the name of this variety. I have to look at my map, but we planted this one up on the higher mound too, because every time we planted a white sapote on the typical ground level, it dies within a year. And up here, where it's a foot above flood stage, it does fine.
How old is this tree?
This tree was planted about 4 years ago.
Okay.
And another thing that does very well out here is the wax jambu. At first they struggle without water, but once they get going for a few years, they're pretty much intolerant to flooding, they're tolerant to drought, and they grow profusely. We air layer this thing to death every year, and it just keeps coming back.
Now, depending on the variety, I mean, this tree will give you more fruit than any other tree, but depending on the variety, a lot of bugs can get in there. Do you find that? Yeah, some varieties are more prevalent to bugs getting in there. Some of the newer ones are more resistant to them. I don't know why that is. Maybe they have a thicker skin on them or a bigger flesh. These are of this variety in particular it's a green variety and it gets a lot of bugs in there, whereas I have a red variety over here that's usually bug free. But every once in a while we'll get a bug in it. I have this is a curiosity fruit here. It's nothing that I would recommend anybody grow. It's called sunkoya. It's an annona. It's related to sugar apple, soursop, all that. It's a very big fruit, size of a small pumpkin, and it kind of has a little bit of a pumpkin flavor crossed with pond apple, if you've ever tried pond apple, which is not very tasty. But you can make drinks with it if you want to de-seed it and blend it up in a blender like you would do soursop with some coconut milk and some sugar. It does make an excellent drink. It's very tricky to fruit because the flowers it'll flower, and the flower stays on the tree for a whole year before it gets pollinated. So it's a tricky one to set fruit. And so longan is another one that does very well in the drought as well. It does very good out here. We don't irrigate that one as well. We did for the first few years, and then after that they do fine. You can have seeds of longans fall on the ground here and they'll germinate in the summertime, and they'll grow just fine without irrigation because they'll get their taproot down pretty quickly. Macadamia is one we do out here, but they seem to be a very weak tree and I struggle with them. Now, the trees that get the taproot down quickly, those are the ones, if the water table's rising, that you might have trouble with.
Some of them. Mostly it's white sapote and avocado are the trickiest. They're the ones that really get burned by that fluctuating water table. A lot of other things like black sapote will penetrate to the water table, get flooded, and then they survive. Same with mango. Their taproot will get flooded with water and it doesn't.
Now, I know mangoes are pretty easy to transplant out of the ground and move. They survive pretty well. What about something like the other trees, like Mamey or even Sapadilla? Sapadilla easy to transplant?
I've transplanted them before. I think they're relatively easy. I prefer not to do them that way. There's growers out here, like palm growers will grow their palms in the ground and then dig them up because they're easy to transplant. It's very hard to do that with a fruit tree because you've got different types of roots under the ground that you're cutting into, and some don't tolerate being cut on. I find that the mango tree, if you cut the taproot, it really impedes the growth of that tree. But if you don't cut the taproot and you just cut the lateral roots, it's not so bad. But I don't recommend digging up any fruit tree unless you really have to. But Sapadilla, I've done that before and they tolerate it pretty well.
Is there one that's more challenging than others that you would definitely...
Avocado is tough, yeah, once they're big. And then mango too is once it's big, it's tough. This is my shade house here. This is where we do our propagation, and our young propagated trees we put in here to keep them protected because young trees always need a little bit of extra protection. Even seedlings a lot of times will benefit from having a little bit of protection. We've got about 30 to 50% shade in here depending on the section that it's in. So everything we start off in here, Over here we have avocados. Typically we do avocados without bagging them, but most of our propagated stuff that we graft we'll put in individual bags. Makes like a little greenhouse. You don't have to worry about watering it because it's self-contained recirculation in there. Leave them in a bag for about a month, then they're ready to come out, and then there's several stages we'll go through, maybe heavy shade to light shade, and then we'll put them out into full sun. Right now we're loaded with avocados because in the wintertime it's one of the things that we propagate the most is avocados. Next we'll move on to carambola. But every type of fruit has its own specific time frame that they like to be grafted in. Some are tolerant of year-round temperatures and can be grafted throughout the year. But a lot of the major ones like your avocados, your mangoes, they have specific time frames where they should be grafted. So.
Okay. So sometimes they're better than other times to graft specific fruits.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
So everything is different. So if we need to graft some black sapote, we might do it in April. If we're doing white sapote, we might do it in March. Avocado, we'll do it from November to February. Mangoes we'll do in the summertime, usually June to August or September. And you know, everything has its own specific time frame, and a lot of things we're still experimenting with because we haven't narrowed down what works best and what period of time. And sometimes we're just too busy to do other things. Like in the wintertime, we don't have time to experiment with what else we can graft because we're too busy doing avocados.
And it's not that it won't work at other times, just your chances are better.
Your chances are better, yeah,
okay.
Exactly.
Good. I see a bunch of breadfruit here you have.
Yeah, even inside the house here, they still got a little bit beat up, but there's no real cold protection in here. It's just more wind protection. We even lost a few from the cold, but in about a month, they're busting out. They'll recover just fine. Once we do our propagation, once everything comes out, then we'll set everything out on the beds. And we've got 10 acres here where we intermingle grove and nursery space. But most of the grove on this end is your mangoes, and then we'll have longans, jackfruit.
And how big are these? Are 25
These
gallons,
are 45 gallon pots here.
So how big do you go in the pots?
45 gallon is about as big as we'll do.
And look at all this fruit on this tree in a 45 gallon pot. So if somebody wanted to grow in pots at home, for a while it'll work, right? For
a while it'll work. Eventually you want to get it in the ground. There are a few varieties like Pickering that'll stay in the pots a little bit longer, but I always tell people the sooner you get them in the ground, the better they're going to do, because if they're confined to a pot, if you were to leave this tree in there for another 2 years and then put it in the ground, it probably wouldn't fare very well. It wouldn't grow very fast.
So when you say the sooner, how soon can you get one in the ground? 1 gallon, 2 gallons?
Oh yeah, 1 or 2 gallons.
So the sooner the better?
The sooner the better.
Is it better to have a 3 gallon in the ground than in a pot?
A 3 gallon is, I always recommend 3 gallon to start off with, because you know you've got a healthy tree. You can tell if it's going to be a healthy tree in a 3 gallon or if it's going to be a lousy tree. So if you get a healthy tree in a 3 gallon, as long as you can give water to it for the first couple years to baby it, that's the best way, because you get it young in the ground and the roots will go in every direction. Rather than in a bigger pot, it's slower to get its roots out because there's such a concentration of roots right there. So if you want instant fruit and instant tree, go with a big pot. But if you are willing to invest the time, go with a small one. In the long run, you'll be ahead of the game.
So for a 3 gallon mango, how long could you take to expect fruit if you put it in the ground at 3 gallons?
In 3 to 4 years.
What about a black sapote?
About the same.
Okay.
About the same. And that goes the same for just about everything. Maybe an avocado would take a little bit longer because they do need to develop a bigger, extensive root system. Because the fruit is so rich, it pulls a lot from the root system. So even a mango tree that's 6 foot tall that you can go ahead and let fruit. I wouldn't recommend you letting an avocado fruit at 6 foot because it takes so much more nutrition from the ground than a mango does.
So is it better to take off the
It's better
fruit?
to take the fruit off and let the tree get about a 10-foot size before you let it really produce. Now this is our avocados. These,
wow.
So there were avocados we still had in the house. These are avocados out here. And we just keep rotating them out. As they get to the top of the stake, then we'll put them into a bigger pot. And it's always a constant rotation. Once they hit a certain height, then we'll put them into the next size up so that they don't sit in one pot for a very long time. You don't want them to get root bound. And so once it hits the top of this pot, this stake here, it's ready to go into the next size. When it gets to the top of the stake in the next size, it's ready to go into the next size. So we progressively upgrade them from pot to pot, and it's usually every 9 months to a year that we bump them up little by little.
So what size is this?
This is a 3-gallon. But this is not a full, these aren't ready to go yet. This is just, they're put in there to grow out. When they're about 3 foot tall, that's when they're ready.
So you're saying that's the ideal time to get them in the ground? 3 gallon?
3 foot, 3
now,
to 4
if you don't have
foot.
a choice, then you go to the 7 gallon, but...
Sure, yeah.
But in the ground would be more ideal.
Yeah, put them in the ground, the sooner the better. So when they're in a 3-gallon pot, see, they're already flowering and trying to fruit, but you need to take that fruit off. The tree could actually kill itself by over-fruiting in a small container like that. But that's the size they're ready to go in the ground. Or you could go to the next size up and get yourself a little more established tree. But you're just looking for looking at a little bit more money.
But if you do that, then now it's not ideal, like you were saying earlier.
Yeah,
it's going to grow better in
avocados, the best range on those is probably a 7 to 10 gallon. Mangoes, I find the best range on those 3 to 5 gallons. Avocados, because if you have a bigger pot, you have more root mass in there, and they seem to take better in the ground.
How long before a white sapote in the ground before it'll fruit? It takes a little longer, right?
Yeah, 3 to 4 years.
3 to 4.
Yeah.
So here's your mangoes here that you planted.
Yeah, there's more Namdakmai here. These are the original. This is part of the original grove that we planted about 20 years ago.
And these are how far apart?
These are a little bit further. They're 12 foot apart.
12 feet.
And then we have some Promkai Mia here, which we planted about 8 years ago. And they've struggled because we've had successive hurricanes after we planted them.
But now looking at the 12 feet, ultimately you still have the same issue as you had with the 8 feet. You got to stay on them.
Yeah, you have to stay on them and keep them thinned.
How long has this been in the ground?
2001, so 20...
So you've been obviously keeping these on top of these because they're not even touching.
Yeah, we've been keeping them pruned pretty good.
But if you don't keep them pruned, then you get into a situation like this one here.
Yeah, you see that one's grown massively.
So is that the same variety?
The same variety, planted at the same time. It's just this one maybe was sitting on a little more soil, maybe it had a more vigorous root stock.
But you've been pruning this one as well.
But I've been pruning this one as well.
So,
and this one wasn't affected by the hurricane as much as the one next to it. You can see that the one next to it lost a lot of its leaves from the hurricane, and this one just a small portion.
But assuming you leave them at 12 feet, and this one, and then assuming they're not affected, if this tree was growing like this one, even though you pruned it, it would still be way too close if you wanted to maintain this size, right?
Yeah, it would. Yeah, that's why I say 20 to 25 feet for a mango tree is probably
And even at this size, like 14, 15 feet, 20 would be good.
It's difficult to pick you can pick the top of these with a pole picker, but you really don't want the tree to get any taller than this if you want to efficiently pick the fruit.
How many feet is that?
That's about 15 or 16 right there.
So would you say 20 by 20 or 25 by 25 is the ideal?
Ideal.
Anything close?
And keep them 15 to 16 foot tall, something manageable.
Okay.
And that, when we planted these right here, we kept that in mind, and we wanted to keep them short as well, but they've been neglected because hurricanes just are so frustrating to deal with. Now,
if you keep these short long term, will they still fruit?
They still fruit. In fact, these were my most productive trees a couple years ago. And
Even
this
at
year,
this size?
at this size, was probably pulling 40 to 50 fruit per tree.
So here's the thing people say, how old are these trees?
Off the top of my head, I think they're about 8 years old.
So I know somebody that says it's okay if you planted another tree right here, that's like 8 feet, let's say. If you're going to keep them this size and you're getting 50 fruit per tree and you're able to keep them this size, it's possible to do and ideally the better because you're getting more fruit ultimately than having one tree here.
Yeah, but the thing is, you're not getting any shade on this tree from this tree. If you had a tree here in the middle, you'd be getting shade on this tree from this tree right here. So this seems to work out good. If you can keep them at 6 or 7 foot tall, this 10-foot distance right here seems ideal because you get sunlight all the way around. And at first, for the first couple years we were getting fruit off of these things, they were gorgeous trees, very proportionate. But we've had to clean them up. I mean, we've gone through 4 hurricanes since we planted these things, and it's just, we lose our mind straightening them up each time, and then their roots get racked and cut and damaged, and now it's almost as if I don't even know if these trees are viable anymore because they've been so wrecked. They've been moved so many times that their roots are just mangled garbage underneath.
Sure.
So it might be better for me to just start over again.
Really? Okay.
And that's what I've decided to do with this row as well. We just haven't gotten around to it, but this line of trees here was just so mangled. There's just so many trees out here, it's hard to get to them and prune them all before the hurricane. And the only way to save a good tree is to prune it severely right before the hurricane so that the wind just rides over the trees and doesn't move the...
That's the best way, is to prune your tree.
Doesn't lay the tree over.
Even if it's going to cost you missing fruit for a year, still prune it back.
It's still better because the damage, ultimately, if you left that beautiful tree just fall over, the root damage underneath, it takes years to recover, and then you're still going to have to cut the top back anyway. So
now, if you stake up the tree, then you got a chance of it snapping, right?
Yeah.
But if it snaps, it's just like cutting it. The roots will grow back, but you're not disturbing the roots. So what's better, to stake it or to prune it?
Prune it. Prune it, absolutely. Because as long as you get the leaf off of the tree, there's hardly any wind resistance on that tree. So that tree will not go over. Even a tornado won't knock over a full-size mango tree if it doesn't have any leaf on it. But if it has leaf, that's when it's got the sail. And every leaf will help push that tree over. So if you get every single leaf off of that tree, it'll withstand any wind.
So the ideal thing, if somebody has one tree and a hurricane's in the forecast, prune the tree way back, paint the tree if you have time, and let it survive, and you might lose a year or two of fruit, but the tree will be fine.
You'll lose 1 year of fruit. The following year, you won't get fruit on it. But the second year, it'll be back to normal. It'll probably be even better looking tree by then too.
All right, so the last question of this is, if you're planting the trees close, ideally, regardless of what you do, the ideal size between trees is what, 10 feet for sun and air?
Yeah.
So that would mean 20 feet between would give you, then you'd have to go to 20 feet to get 10 feet, because if the trees come out, so 20 by 20 would give you 10 feet between.
Well, yeah, 20 by 20 would, then you can let your trees get up to about 15 foot tall. But if you're giving them 10 feet, then only let them get up to 7 or 8 feet
Gotcha.
high. So it depends on how high you want to let your tree get as to how far apart they can be planted.
Gotcha. So at the end of the year, let's say this tree was knocked down by a hurricane and you kept it. At the end of the year, if you cut that in half, let's say, or 1/3, because half's a lot, 1/3, it'll be fine. You can keep it just keep doing it by 1/3 every year.
You can keep doing it by 1/3 every year.
Got it. All right, and what about these swells that you planted them in? Is there a reason for that? Or is this just mulch, or did you plant them in rows like that?
It is a swale. The original owner put these swales in. You don't really need to do that for mangoes here on Pine Island, but it's a good practice out here, because what the swales do, not just elevates your mango trees out of the water, which is not critical out here. But what it does is it holds a reservoir of rainwater. Because we don't get rain out here, we need to replenish our groundwater as much as possible. Instead of, if this land was flat, the water would go into the ditches on the road and then go back out to the mangroves. And then we wouldn't benefit from the water capture. So having these ditches and swales in here allows for the water to accumulate here and then perk into the ground and replenish our groundwater so that we have fresh water throughout the year to irrigate our potted plants. And also the mangoes have fresh water to tap into throughout the year, because there's water sitting under us. So we need to hold as much water out here as possible. We don't want it to go. And so this would be a great practice for avocados, to elevate them like this, and they would do fine out here. As for mangoes, it's not necessary unless you need to hold your water.
Sure. And that's if you're going like somewhere like in Noxahatchee where the water sits, it doesn't drain as well. It's better to put them in a swell.
Yes.
Great. Look at all these. So all these, and
most of these mango trees here are about 20 years old.
In the ground.
Yeah, in the ground. We've replaced little by little, and then here we open up to bigger sizes. This is where we'll put our avocados into bigger sizes. We'll put our mangoes into bigger sizes.
And this is all wholesale, mostly, pretty much.
We will retail. Anybody who walks in here, we can retail to, but I would say 80% of our sales are wholesale.
And your fruit is only retail that you sell?
Our fruit is only retail. We don't produce enough fruit to sell wholesale at this point, especially with all the hurricanes. It just cut our production back quite a bit.
Sure.
So.
Very nice.
It just goes down. From here, it just progresses to bigger and bigger pot sizes. Usually 25 gallon is as big as we'll do, except for a few mangoes in 45 gallons.
And what inspired you to do this? Like when you were starting out, and getting started, did you go to other nurseries and ask them to help you get started, or did you just have the idea you were going to do this from scratch, or did it just turn out this way? Well,
I started off as an accountant. I was in Sarasota, but I always had growing in my blood. And I was working part-time for a hobbyist in Sarasota who had grafted 20 varieties of mangoes on his tree, and he would literally sit me down in the evenings and force me to eat mangoes until I was sick of them. But then at that point, I grew a love for all these different varieties. And we would literally sit down and eat 10 or 15 mangoes in an evening. And every time that I tried one, I tasted the different flavors in there, and I wanted to try another one, and another one, and another one. And I just started collecting different types. And it got to the point where I worked for a nursery up the road here. It was called Treehouse Nursery. I started there in 1999. And they were the original owners of this property here. And they did nothing but fruit trees. And then from that point on, I just wanted to explore more. At that time, we only did maybe 5 or 6 different types of mango trees and maybe 3 or 4 types of avocados. And I wanted to broaden that. And I wanted to do 50 types of mangoes, 50 types of avocados. But I find the more types you have, the more difficult it is to keep up with them. And you know, somebody will want this type and somebody will want that type. I wanted to be able to satisfy everybody, every type of mango out there. If you tried to collect them all, there's thousands of varieties out there that's impossible to keep that variety in stock. So I like to taste all the fruits and recommend what I think is the best. So I do 45 types of mangoes, which I think are my favorite. Sure. And that's what I stick with. If I don't like it, then I probably won't do it unless I get a number of people who ask for that specific mango. Or maybe some of those mangoes are very disease intolerant, and I don't like to do anything that's not very tolerant of, because there's so many diseases out there for mangoes. I want to provide people with resistant, strong, productive, good tasting mangoes. As far as avocados, carambola, guava, you name it, every type of fruit, I want people to have the best ones that are available. So every year we go around looking for what's the best. And every year we have to start adjusting our production to accommodate what would be the best. So every year we don't produce the same avocados over and over again. We're producing the better and better and more flavorful, more productive, what's working at that time. So I try to keep up with it, not just the same old, same old.
Sure. And what about bananas? Do you do bananas here as well?
We do. Not too many different types. Pretty much our most requested is a Namwa, ice cream. We are trying a few new red types, Jamaican red, and then I think there's a Puerto Rican red, or just a dwarf red.
Have any seedlings come out of here of mangoes or avocados where somebody brought you this and said, this is from my tree, and you liked it and you decided, you told them, give it a name and we'll promote it? Or
yeah. As far as mangoes, I would say 99% of the mangoes that people bring me, I don't like.
Sure.
I don't like, but they think it's great because they raised it themselves and they had so much pride in it. And I hate to turn them down and I say, yeah, it's a good mango, but it's not going to fit in what I do. So I've rejected most of the mango varieties that have come in here. But as far as avocados, there have been a lot of avocado varieties that have been brought to me throughout the years that are very good. And I will name them after whoever brought them in. One of them is called Victoria. Victoria Black is one that we do. It was grown from a seed on Fort Myers Beach. The original tree is long gone, but we do keep it going here. It's a big black avocado, very creamy, not watery at all. It does great in our climate and our environment over here on this coast. That's a real good one. There's also another one called Dorothy that was created on another little small island right here off of Pine Island, and that's a very good one as well. But yeah, every time we get something good in, we will offer the people to name it after them and promote it from that point. Nothing's really taken off on a world scale yet because everybody's still looking at varieties that have been known for several years. But there are always new ones that pop up.
What's the seasons of those, Victoria and Dorothy?
Both of them come in around October to November.
Okay.
So and that seems to be a sweet spot for a lot of good avocados.
Well, I have to come back when they're ripe and try them.
We have probably, there's one called Malama, which is a black skin that's very good. I don't know where that originated. There's also one called Nishikawa.
I've had
that's
that.
a green skin. That came from Hawaii,
yeah.
But that's a very good one as well. There's a couple of Hawaiian selections that do good. There's one from Nicaragua called Talpeño, which is excellent. It's a black skin one. Comes in August. One of the earliest of the best avocados.
Have you had a Rani?
A Rani, I've never heard of Rani.
Yeah, those are really excellent on the East Coast at Alora Farms.
I'd like to try that.
Oh, they're excellent. And they fruit. I just pulled my last one off, and here we are in the middle of March.
Wow.
Yeah, they're known to be a late variety, and they get black.
Oh, wow.
They taste like a big Oro Negro. They're delicious.
Oh, and that's a very good variety, too.
Yeah, and so you said mangoes. You said most mangoes, 99% are not good. Have you tasted one that was good that you named?
From seed?
Yeah.
No, and I literally have 1,000 seedlings that I'm growing that I haven't tasted yet. These are specific hybrids, and I like to deal with ice cream. Ice cream doesn't produce very well on the East Coast, but the ice cream mango on this coast does very well.
Oh, does it?
And it's my absolute favorite mango.
I'm in agreement. It's delicious.
I've hybridized that one with several different varieties, and I have the seedlings growing. hopefully within the next 2 years, I'll have a variety that can be grown throughout Florida that produces well, that has that same flavor. Other mangoes that we're hybridizing are other mango species crossed with mangoes, mostly Casturi. Casturi is my favorite of the mangifera species besides indica, and that one we crossed with several strains of mangifera indica to see what kind of nice cross we get. But Casturi is incredible. It tastes like a sweet passion fruit. It's like eating candy. It's a small mango, but it's so flavorful.
Oh, wow.
So, we will. In the next few years, I'm sure we will have some new strains out there that we'll release. But right now, we're just working on our avocados because there's so many of those to weed through and cull and see which ones we should do over, you know, some of the old varieties like Donnie and Catalina. They're weaning off of our list because they're more on the watery side. Even though they're somewhat good, they're not as good as these new varieties. So we're kind of weeding those out and going with the new improved varieties on that.
I'm glad to hear you say that about Donnie, because I find it very watery, and some people say when you eat them later in the season, they're not as bad.
If you pick them at the very latest of their crop, they are decent.
Decent. Not like the new ones.
But they're not like a Nishikawa or an Oro Negro. Yeah. They're not like your later season avocados. But another one I like is, I mentioned it earlier, Malama. That's a fantastic avocado. And Nishikawa, Talpeño. Talpeño is a really good one. That you won't find any information on. And a few people here on Pine Island to grow it, and they won't give it up. They keep the fruit to themselves, so you'll never see it for sale, because even I'll produce maybe 50 of them a year, and I just give them, I eat them and I give them to friends and family because
you will have the tree in the future?
I do have the tree. I do have the tree.
What's the season of those?
August, believe it or not.
August.
So it's the earliest avocado that has a really good flavor.
Folks, contact the link below if you want to get some of these avocado varieties. Absolutely amazing. Absolutely. So, anything else to show us here?
No, it's just boring nursery on the other side.
Nothing boring about this stuff. All right. Well, that's great information, great knowledge. I definitely recommend people check out your website. I'll put it below. Thank you so much for sharing.
You're welcome. Thank you for coming out.
Thank you. All right, everybody. Thank you, Steve, for being on the show. That was great, everybody. I told you we get into a lot of things there today. Steve, what's the last thing you want to leave the viewers with? What do you want to tell them?
Well, in the summertime, if you come out here, we are jam-packed with fruits, all different kinds of tropical fruits. We have fruits all year round, but in the summertime is the best time to come out here for an assortment of mangoes, you name it. Everything you're looking for is in the summertime. But when we don't have fruits, we also grow our own tomatoes. We grow our own produce out here, carrots, potatoes, corn even, onions. That's just to supply our fruit stand during the winter months when we don't have the fruit available. Right now it's a bad time of year for fruit, but we always have something out here. You're never going to be disappointed if you make the drive.
How crowded does it get here in the summertime?
We're slam packed.
So better to come earlier in the day, or
earlier in the day, or come towards the weekend when we reharvest. Usually we harvest twice a week in the summertime, and if you come on a Friday or Saturday, you get your best selection, because that's what we try to supply and harvest everything in abundance for the weekend.
All right, everybody, there you have it. I'm going to put the link below. I hope you enjoyed this video. And if you'd like to see more videos like this, and you know somebody who has a great place for me to go film, my email address is below. And for Steve, you can contact him through his website. The phone number and email are there. Definitely go there and check it out. This is Fruitscapes in Pine Island. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Have a great day, everybody, and keep growing.